Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I just felt really called to do this video today because I can't help but think that there are a lot of parents and friends and teachers that mentors that are dealing with a lot of things. So this is a break in the videos that I'm doing right now on the different, kind of breaking down the deities in the Bible. And I wanted to touch on the parable of the prodigal son and its uncomfortable truths. Today we are raising children, and like what I'm dealing with right now with one of my troubled youth is that there's this high sense of entitlement. This is not my child. I'm a mentor, but they have managed to get themselves kicked out of their house, kicked out of relatives' homes, and basically they're just living on couches right now, or living in homeless shelters. And we can say, "Oh, poor them," but whenever you sit back and you're able to look at things, or you're looking at that parent must be a bad parent or whatever, it's not always true. Our youth today are having a lot of problems. And I've long felt and feel that the parable of the prodigal son is a very helpful parable. So we have to set the stage with this one a little bit. This is a parable that Jesus is talking about in front of the Pharisees. And the Pharisees were the Bible teachers of that day. You might compare them to preachers. So they're getting, he's getting, he's talking this new way of thinking. And this is kind of like the old guard. So you've got the new guard and new philosophies, and then the old folks. So this makes up into some things because it's not this happy ending story or happily ever after story of the son who goes away from the father, and he learns his lesson, and he comes back and he's accepted. No, there's some misgivings in this story. What actually happened? Well, the basic makeup of the story is there's a younger son who demands his inheritance, a father who grants it, a son who wastes everything with reckless living, a moment of awakening in a pig pen, returns home, a father runs to him, a celebration, an older brother who refuses to join the party because he's resentful, a father pleading with an older son to see the beauty in forgiveness, and a final unresolved tension. I would say that that's a pretty good description of our modern family. Whenever there's siblings and you have a child that is problematic, rebellious. So what are some of the misconceptions on this? Well, the story is, one misconception is that the story is mainly about the younger son. No, Jesus spends half the parable on the older brother. The parable is really about two sons, not one. Another misconception is the father represents passiveness. The father doesn't represent passiveness. He represents radical grace. Grace that is costly, but yet at the same time not careless. The third misconception is the younger son repented perfectly. He didn't. The son was just in a bad spot and thought, hey, I'm going to go back to my dad and see if I can work for him. Because his dad's hired hands ate better than he did. Another misconception is the older brother is just a side character. But no, the older brother has representation. The older brother represents the Pharisees in this parable. And the other misconception we touched on earlier is that it's a happily ending story. It's not. It doesn't. The younger son is restored, but the older son is not. The older son is still resentful of what's happened. He's been there the whole time, yet the dad drops everything for this other son. And this creates a unresolved issue. And Jesus leaves this with open questions to the Pharisees, like, trying to, in this situation, ask them if they're going to, more or less be more accepting. Are you going to come inside the Father's house or stay outside and live in your own self-righteousness? And that's in this situation, Jesus is speaking to these teachers of the law like they look at themselves like they're the sons that have been there the whole time. And they're resentful, and they are, whenever you think that new people are going to come to the faith, well, they were resentful about it because, the Jews were the chosen people. And now Jesus is saying that God's love is open for everybody. So, yeah, they are the existing son. But we have some core truths here. God's love is scandalous. It's not senseless. I mean, most people look at God as this God of, you're righteous or you're not, and if you don't do what I say, then you're going to get in trouble, which is hell. But the Father runs in this parable. Jesus is describing God as running to his son, which Jewish patriarchs did not do. You had to come crawling back and ask for forgiveness, but the Father actually forgives first, which is saying that God forgives us first, but we still have to come back and confess. This isn't a get out of jail free card with God. It's just, this is God's want. Truth too is that sin is not just rebellion, it is a rupture in the relationship. So in my situation, the son does not respect his stuff or the things that his father provided for him. And is rude and disrespectful and doesn't want to listen and has no real reason for these things. It's just general rules that the son doesn't want to follow that are perfectly common sense. One such thing would be if you are sharing a house with somebody that you don't make a bunch of noise at 2 or 3 in the morning when they go to work the next day. That's the kind of things that is, you have to remember that you share. And it's disrespectful to a person who's paying for everything. And that job is providing that for you. The other thing about this truth 3 is self-righteousness is not just a deadly rebellion. And the older son obeyed outwardly, but was inwardly resentful, bitter, and proud. All right, so, this kind of talks, when we talk to the older son, we're talking to the other kid. So that speaks to your children that are, good to your face and doing a lot of bad stuff behind your back. That also leads to destruction. That also leads to an eventual discovery, an eventual pain, and an eventual rupture in the relationship as well. Truth 4 is the father pursues both sons. We look at this story as if the father only went towards the troubled child, but in this situation, the father is going after both sons. So that tells us about our relationship with God, but it also shows that parents, you know, as an example, we need not overpay attention to either one. You can't give too much attention to the problem child, but you also can't give too much attention to the good child. I've seen this in other relationships where it creates eating disorders and all kinds of stuff because you're focusing so much on the child that's creating all the problem that the child that might actually be doing well starts becoming problematic to get attention. So as parents, that's a very good rule that we can't give too much attention to one over the other because it does create real pain. But also, that also can show us that other children can play along and be doing things behind our back that are destructive. The real homecoming isn't physical, it's a relationship. It's whenever the relationships are restored. But if we see in this, as in most households, the relationship doesn't really get restored, it just kind of gets patched. So it's something to look out for. It's something to pay attention to in how you deal with the situations. And in a lot of cases, the situation doesn't get resolved till the lesson's learned. You know, as in with the parable of the prodigal son, the problem child had to lose it all, had to live poorly, had to eat poorly, had to be treated poorly to understand how good he had it. And maybe respecting that would have saved him a lot of trouble. The theologians wrestled with this one too. St. Augustine saw the younger son as a human wandering from God to the far country of sin. And the father's embrace symbolized divine grace that precedes human merit. And I do think that's pretty accurate. A parent's love generally, I mean, there's exceptions out there, generally will be unyielding. It will be more than it should be than the average Joe walking on the streets forgiveness for their children. I think that that's fairly accurate of our Father in heaven as well. Martin Luther, basically the starter of the Protestant Reformation away from Catholicism and into Protestantism, thought that his emphasis was that the younger son's return showed repentance mixed with self-motivation, yet the father still received him, illustrating the justification of grace alone. This is true. We don't deserve our standing with God. It's not something we can earn because we'll never be righteous like that. It's very true. But it also shows us the manipulative situation that a father has to go through, was the son wasn't truly repentant. He just didn't want to live the way he was. So he comes back. And we don't ever really know how the story truly ends because it stops at the party. Did the son take the lesson that he learned out in the world and how hard it is? And how honestly everybody is generally going to have a higher priority than you, unless it's in a lot of situations, you know, there's marriage, but in, you know, and that still isn't a guarantee. You know, the divorce rate's is pretty high, but in those rare situations, there are individuals that choose each other every day. But the only thing that should be like that is also your family, and your mother and father's love should be like that. So there's a lot of uncomfortable truths in this, that it's not just that perfect situation with the happy ending that we all tend to get from church a lot of times. The meaning of the parable is really the Father, one is the Father's heart. The Father's heart should be compassionate. It should be initiative, restorative, celebrating. It should have patience. It should have grace. This is what, as fathers, we should try for. And I would also add fair, because the punishment does need to meet the crime. There has to be consequences for bad actions. The younger son, it represents the open rebellion, the self-destruction, and hopefully, after the lesson is learned, the awakening to return to be restored. And I think we all are a little bit of that. We have to learn the hard way a lot. I know I have. The older son represents the hidden rebellion, the pride and the resentment, and the self-righteousness, a different distance from our fathers and God, and this one hits so home: a refusal to accept the grace. Man, we really want God to punish people because we don't like them. We want God to put vengeance on people who've wronged us rather than let God work in his own time. I'm guilty of it too sometimes. God, just teach them, but God knows the whole story too. He knows what brought them to that point too. The unfinished ending even has its own meaning behind it, and that's really, are we going to enter into the Father's joy, or are we going to stay outside in pride? That really comes down to when the household in the household situation, will the father will he drop the resentment that he may have and openly accept the son that's returning? Or will the son have to stay outside in pride because the father is too prideful to actually grant forgiveness? And we have to remember that. Are we going to live in our pride, or are we going to grant people grace? And that brings us to the question: who are you in this story? Whenever you look at all of the characters, are you the father in the situation you might be dealing with? Are you the son that left? Or are you the son that stayed and is just resentful about everything? There are all kinds of situations in life that this could be applied to. Are you genuinely happy for people whenever they succeed? Or are you secretly resentful? Do you feel like you should have gotten that promotion at work over them, even though you may or may not know what they were doing behind the scenes? Are you living a seen life instead of thinking about the unseen things? I think it's something we all have to consider. We all have to look at ourselves through open eyes and really examine ourselves. And some of the truth is, you're going to be various characters throughout your life. You're going to be the father in some situations, the older son, or the prodigal son at some point in your life. But where are you right now, and what are you dealing with? And how does the lesson of the parable help you get through it? Anyway, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. You can always leave a comment on the video. This is just kind of a one-off outside of the series that I'm currently doing. But I felt very called, given the situation I'm in and how often this parable has come to mind. Also, you can email me at ufsessions@gmail.com. Anyway, I hope you all have a blessed one. Hey, stay Stay unfiltered, folks. Talk to you next time.